Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Grace of a Military Child in Life podcast. Military families are not like your traditional family. They are strong, brave, resilient, and some of the most incredible people I know. My name is Gracie, a U.S. Army brat, and I am your host. I am honored to be able to give military family members like myself a place for them to share their stories and experiences in the military life. Stay tuned for this week's guest. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Grace of a Military Child in Life. Today, I'm here with Lynzee. So, Lynzee, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on. I'm super excited to get to talk about so many different things today. But start by telling me what it's like being a military family member.
Yeah. So my husband's been active duty. He's been enlisted for, I think it's been about 10 or so years. And then he transitioned to the officer side. So we've kind of had both aspects of it. So it's been about 13 or so years. We've kind of lost track after that point. But we've been married for 12 years of that. And I think during that time, I always say, I've always tried to identify, have my own identity as a military spouse. And I've struggled with that for so long. And I feel as though now I'm coming up to terms and grasp that I'm okay, I'm a military spouse. I need to use my platform or my experience and help others who have just joined or are experiencing hardship. So yeah, I think it's still a process. It's hard being a military spouse and being a mom and doing all this without family. It's I don't even know how people do it all the time. I think the key is having a good support system, That's the end of the day.
Right, because you are on your own and you're moving to so many different places all around the country and sometimes even all around the world. And you don't have your, family back home. You don't have grandparents, right next door or right up the street that you can say, hey, I need a babysitter. There were so many times where my mom, we would just meet somebody when we lived in Texas, and it was week or 2 weeks, month later, and my mom's like, hey, can you watch the girls for a weekend because we're going out of town?
Yeah,
and so
I know.
that
what part of Texas?
San Antonio.
Texas? Okay, us too. That's where we're at right now.
We lived at Fort Sam.
Okay. Oh, nice.
So
very cool.
I loved it there. So many different
amazing
experiences, and Taco Cabana, Rudy's, the best.
We came from Fort Carson, and they had a Rudy's there. So, and we lived in when we lived in El Paso, they had Taco Cabana. So right when we pulled in, I was like, okay, here we go.
You feel right at home.
It's so good. But no, I think you're right. I think it's I can't even imagine with your mom, finding a last minute babysitter or finding somebody you trust is the key. So
yeah,
I don't know how she did that.
You build that trust, especially within the military community, pretty instantly. Whereas, when we moved to Florida and we were in more civilian aspects, we would fly in people from the military community to be babysitters because,
Isn't that so wild?
Yeah, you don't have that trust with, the civilian community as much as you do the military community. It's so different.
So true. It's so different. It really is. So no, that's so great. Well, one I just want to say before we even jump into everything, thank you for having me. But also I think it's so amazing. We briefly chatted about this, but that you have had so many people on your podcast. I think you have over 100, right?
I do. I have lost count. I didn't even realize when I hit 100. It was insane because it just keeps going.
I know. No, I was so impressed. And we talked about it before we started recording, but that you actually take the time to follow up with people, do your research, all of this. So I'm super impressed by you. So I was it's fantastic that you're doing this and just giving people a voice and kind of recognizing them too. So.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Because as a military child, we didn't really have much of a voice, much of a platform. There's not people who seek out our stories. And so having that space for them. And then I briefly dated a service member. And so having that experience, it's like, oh, I've seen the life of a military spouse from the child's eyes, but then when you step into that role of a significant other, of a girlfriend and of a fiance, it's this whole nother world out there. And I'm like, now I want to be a military spouse. Like it's such a daring life, but
it is,
so rewarding at the same time from both the child and the spouse's perspectives.
Yeah. Do you feel like when you started dating this person, were you, not that you didn't have like any respect for your mom before, but did you kind of like understand more what your mom was going through? Like you could kind of see that.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
The respect that I have for military spouses, I mean, it was there before because, you know, I was seeing it firsthand and I saw it. My dad was wounded in Afghanistan. So seeing it from the caregiver aspect, like I had so much respect for it. But then, you know, being in a relationship myself, a military relationship, and it was all long distance, like all long distance. And so you have that added respect. And the first couple months were Japan. So,
and the time difference, everything.
So then that much added, you know, that added hardship onto it. The respect just, you know, grows there. So now I'm like, I want to be a military spouse. Like, you know,
I know.
I don't have that decision fully myself, but it would be an honor. And so that's like when I expanded the podcast to include spouses, because I was like, I know that you guys go through a lot too. And, you know, children never got recognized, like barely. They're finally somewhat starting to, and that's because other military kids are stepping up and saying something about it. But spouses didn't really get recognized either. They were just starting to get recognized a lot when I started this. And so I've loved adding the spouses on and being able to hear what it's like being a spouse, like, you know, firsthand and directly from other spouses.
Right. I know, it's so wild. The military, and I think just the world is like evolving, and it's just so amazing just being a part of it, and just crazy. Crazy.
No, there are so many, it's such a crazy world out there, but there are so many positive things out there that it's insane, and I don't want them to be hidden because there's so much negative in the world too. That it can really, you know, put a cloud over those positive things.
No, I think it's good because in your podcast too, you're recognizing, like I have girlfriends, one of my closest friends who are active duty or who are spouses are active duty, you know, they're nurses. Some of them are stay-at-home moms right now. And like this season of their life, they had to kind of give up their career to raise their children. And, you know, some of them are writers. It's like you meet so many unique people being on this side where I'm like, you know, you need to like get out there. You need to like have a voice and like help other people. And I think a lot of them are just kind of hidden behind their husband's life and their career right now. So I'm just like, this is like your one time, just do it. So it's just wild. So I'm always encouraging my friends. I'm like, just take that next step. You know, you're not going to regret it. I promise. And, you know, my mom and I, we started a podcast, Mother's Purpose, and we just launched it the other day. And you probably know how it is when you're releasing something into the world, you're like, what are people going to say about us? You know, I mean, we don't know a lot about mental health yet, but we're like on the cusp of learning more about it. But just having people judge you, that is terrifying. It's terrifying. So
it is. You never know what other people are going to say. And you get this idea of a project and it's like, it becomes a passion project. Like the podcast is a passion project of mine. You may have seen it on the Instagram a couple times, but the Bigs and Littles program that I'm starting,
I saw that.
That's another passion project of mine. And so like, I've been fortunate to have positive reactions to it.
It's so good.
But like, there was a time where I had a negative reaction to the podcast.
Really?
And it was like the worst. Like I almost stopped podcasting. Really? And it was not even a year after I started. So It
Was it
was
just negative feedback that people were giving you, or just like a comment, or
it was one of my previous employers that was like, this is a lot of your
I
time.
I
Like,
did listen to your podcast about that
yes.
one. Yes.
So it's hard when you have that negativity, and it's like, how do you combat that? How do
I
you,
know.
take that and in a sense use that negativity to your advantage and be like, no, like this is important. This is what is needed. You might not understand it because you're not in a military family or, whatever
Yeah.
situation and topic that your project is surrounded on, but you might not understand it. But there are other people that it's like, you always think of a negative comment and it outweighs the positive, like 100
So true.
comments that you have, but it
I always
really
say
has to
that.
be the other way around.
100%. That's what I was telling my mom. I was like, we got to just flush out, like, if we hear anything negative, which I don't think we would, but whatever. If we did, I was like, we just got to like flush it out, not even think about it. And just think one of my really, my husband's sister, oh my gosh, sorry. I feel like we're like jumping around, but
this is what it's about.
my husband's sister, she lives in Colorado, and she called me, I think it was yesterday when we released it. And she was like, hey, I just want you to know I'm so proud of you. And even if this podcast touches one person, like, you've done your job. And I was like, that is, her taking the time out of her day just to call me was like everything. And I was like, thank you so much for saying that. So I don't know. So it's like, you always have to just think of all these things, even like with your podcast. I saw your at like a marketing ad on it, and I was like, wow, you reached me. So I'm like, you're reaching so many people on this platform. It's amazing. So
Yeah,
yeah. Life.
absolutely. I know it's crazy and so unexpected that it's a whirlwind sometimes.
It is. No, it really is. So no, but it's
Yeah.
been fun.
Yeah. So kind of tell me what it's like, being part of this community and trying to, fit in, but also stick out and be who
Mm.
you are and everything at the same time.
Oh my gosh. Let's see. I think being a part of this community is fantastic. So I think being a part of this community, it changes. Like people always say, and I always thought when people said this was so corny, there are different seasons in your life. And I was always like, what do they mean by that? Seasons? But it's so true. When we were first married, it was all about trying to figure out what we're part of the Army. So I'm like, okay, the Army acronyms, all of this. I'm like, what do they stand for? It's just crazy. What's a platoon? What's a brigade? It's like just trying to fit in, trying to figure out your place when you first are a part of this.
Right.
And then, once you kind of have that figured out, and then you're thinking, how am I going to fit my career? I finished my bachelor's while we were still like enlisted side. And then I finally finished my master's degree. And I'm like, how does that kind of play into? So it's like every different season, it's so true. I've changed my outlook on, military life, and, our marriage has changed so much, with him being gone all the time and having a son, it's just, I started thinking like, I thought I knew what we were doing. And then it's like you PCS and it like flips it again. You're like, wait, here we are starting all over. So it's just a constant whirlwind. That would be like the best answer, is just being a part of this community. It's great. It's sad. It's hard. It's rewarding. So it's just like these ups and downs. It's so hard. It really is. So
Yeah.
and I'm sure like being a part, like a military child too, like I'm always thinking my son, because he's 4, I'm like, I don't know, like when he starts remembering things, but I'm like, I wonder what he's going to remember with us moving so many times. What's that going to be like for him? Because you've
Yeah.
experienced it,
It's so different, because kids don't get to choose this lifestyle.
I know.
Service members choose it. Spouses, in a good sense, choose it. I always hear, and it's sad to say it this way, but like if you're done with it, you have a way out.
Yeah,
And
so
kids,
true.
it's like we're stuck,
I know.
we didn't choose this lifestyle. We didn't ask for it, but here we are. And, you have the people who love it and who thrive on it and who, wouldn't trade the world for it. And those people who hate it and hate every second of it.
Yeah.
And then you have the
So
people who
true.
it's like a roller coaster. And for me, it was like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Um, I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. My dad was Army Reserve
Okay.
and he took a 7-year break in service. So most of my from about probably 2 to 9 was break in service. And
Wow.
so I grew up with my dad always being around, and then he was gone, and then he got hurt, and we moved to Texas. And so that was like my military years, and we were there for 3 years. And then we moved to Florida when he retired. So it was like this kind of back and forth, like all kinds of like civilian to military to civilian to military. And I will always be a military child. Like I will say that till the day I die.
Right. Yeah.
Even though my dad's retired and, all of that, but I still always, I'm proud
I
of it.
know. Yeah.
Um, but I hated Texas when we first moved there. I was like, when are we going back home? Like, when
I
are we going
know.
back to Ohio? And then I loved Texas and I got used to it. And then we moved to Florida and it took 3 years for me to even consider loving Florida. I was like,
Really?
I
Yeah.
hate it here. Like, this is the worst. I want to go back to Texas. I want to go back to Ohio. I want to go back to anywhere else besides here. Um, and so it was that roller coaster of emotions of being in a new place. And I hear it from other kids who are like, okay, well, how do I get on the next plane out? Like, how do I
Yeah.
go back to where I came from? How do I find a way to stay with my friends instead of having to move and make new friends?
Yeah.
And it's something that every single person of a military family faces, spouse, service member, or child.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? I feel like, so my son, he just turned 4 and we moved to San Antonio. It was in April.
Mm-hmm.
And he always says to me, Mom, I miss our Colorado home. And I was like, I know, I miss it too. And I was like, but you have more space here. And he's like, yeah, but I just miss it. I miss my friends. And that always like cuts me. I'm like, I know. I was like, I miss my friends too. But I just like at his age, I'm like always trying to reassure him, like, hey, you're going to meet new friends. It's like so heartbreaking because I'm like, this is like his first big like change. But I'm like, I just hope he adapts. So it's like my biggest like goal for him is just like he adapts okay because he is such a shy kid. I mean, he'll hide when he meets somebody, he like hides behind me because he's so nervous. And he's always like putting his fingers in his mouth. I was like, okay, let's not do that. I was like, you can talk to them or whatever you want to do. But I'm just afraid, like if Luke retires at the path he's on, Leo will be 10 when we get out. So I'm like, hopefully his personality doesn't change a lot. And I don't know. It's unique seeing the side of him because I'm like, he was so outgoing in Colorado and then moved here. He's like a shell. He's so quiet. So
Yeah.
it's so hard. It's hard to see it.
It takes a bit, especially, at his age where he's not necessarily going to school and being
Yeah.
forced, into environments where he's alone and has to make friends. And, there are introverts and there are extroverts. The
Right.
extroverts thrive in this lifestyle.
Oh, I know. So true.
That was me. I was always in, my classes making friends. When I was in 6th grade, you know, it's a small school.
Yeah.
Robert G. Cole is on the same campus of middle school and high school. And so
Okay.
it is tiny. And so it was crazy having that small of a school, but I thought it was normal at the time, and it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But I knew like the whole 6th grade class. Like
Yeah.
I would walk down the hallways and be like, oh, hey, like, hey, so and so, like, how's it going? And hey, and hey. And I knew everyone. But
Yeah.
then, there are people who don't want to be that way. They don't want to know everyone.
Yeah.
They don't care to know everyone. And that's okay too. But it's also hard then, if you're introverted, it's easy to kind of pick up and move and pick up and move and pick up and move
Yeah.
because you're not necessarily out there making all of these friends and meeting all of these people who it's like, all right, well, I don't want to leave you. But then
Yeah.
extroverts, it's hard, because
It's
you
so
make all of
hard.
these friends and then you don't want to leave them. But then also kind of the reverse of introverts may find 1 or 2 really good friends and that's
Yeah.
hard to leave those. And then extroverts, it's like, you know, going out and making new friends. I mean, it does get exhausting at times, but you know, you kind of look for the possibilities of making new friends, but then it's still hard leaving your friends behind.
Yeah, it's so true. So true, true. I was thinking when we lived in Germany for 4 years in Vilsack.
Yeah.
And there were people who lived on post and there were people who lived off post. So you could it depended on your rank, of course. But when we got there, we had the opportunity to live off post and we lived in this German community. And it was like, we immersed ourselves. I thought I was such an extrovert, but it's like, you really change over time. So I was like very reserved, meeting people. And then I would like kind of come out of my shell. It was so bizarre. I've learned that a lot, but about people living over there, there were some people who didn't even leave the base at all.
Wow.
Like they were so nervous because I mean, everything is there. You have your commissary, your PX. You really don't need to leave if you didn't want to. But yeah, there was like this couple I met. They never left for the 2 years they were there. They were like, we're fine. We're content here. I was like, we live in Germany. Like, you need to get out. Like, but that was just who they were. They were just more of like introverts. They liked things the way they were and they didn't need anything outside of it. So it's such a unique, it's kind of, I always think with the military, it is what you make of it. Like for us living over there, I was like, we didn't have our son at that time. So I was like, let's travel. Let's do as much as we can. Everything was so cheap. And that was before COVID. So I was like, let's just get crazy over here. And then when we were getting ready to leave, I was like, oh man, I'm going to miss this so much. Oh, miss it so much. So coming back here it's been interesting. It definitely has.
Yeah. And I think, that's so wild to hear that there are people who don't leave that kind of, that safety net that you have of the base over there, because everyone I talk to seems to be like, all right, well, let's go explore. They have that mindset of, we're only here for so long. Like, let's make the most of it and let's explore and let's, go see a castle every day. Let's hop on a train and go to another country because it's so easy to do that.
So easy.
Flights are cheap between the different countries. It's not like you have to pay $1,000 to get, from one country to another like you do here. Yeah. So it's really an experience that from so many people I've like met and had the opportunity to talk to who have lived over there, it's like let's just make the most of it and travel and let's take our senior pictures at a castle.
I know. It's so, I remember when we got off the bus in Ramstein, we met this couple on the bus. She's like my best friend today, but we somehow ended up at the same hotel in Grafenwehr and I Facebook stalked her, which I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a creep, but I knew she was so fun. So I Facebook stalked her and she had a dog. We had a dog. So I would like catch her walking her dog. So I was like, oh my God, this is like creep status. But I was like, I need to be friends with her. Cause her and I, when we did chat, she was like so adventurous. She always like talked about the things they wanted to do. So I Facebook stalked her and I was like, hey, I'm just throwing this out there. I was like, we're going to be friends. Like, let's go travel together. And the next day we went to like our first German town. And from like that day, we've like, she lives in Tennessee now, but we're constantly talking. But that's like, you kind of have to do that as like, as a spouse, if you're not working or anything like that, you have to like meet other people and kind of build that connection. So, but I was like, this is like creep status for sure. But I was like, it paid off in the end for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned working. It's so hard to find jobs nowadays is hard. Yeah. But then being a military spouse, it's even harder to find jobs because the workforce is just constantly going. And there are so many employers that are like, oh, you're a military spouse, you're going to be moving in X amount of years. Like, we don't want to hire you because of that. And so it's so hard to keep up with that lifestyle. And I mean, you mentioned you had a master's degree. Like that's huge. That's,
but I feel like that doesn't even matter though. Like nowadays it's just like when I ended up getting my bachelor's when I had my son because I waited because as a military spouse, I was like, I'll find something. But then I waited and waited. And finally I was like, okay, I need to get my bachelor's, because everybody was like, it doesn't matter what you have your bachelor's in. We just need a bachelor's. And I was like, I could gain more experience in the workforce than I would in college. So I'm like, it's so silly. Everything's like backwards, but I'm like, oh, it's so crazy. But it's hard though. I will say, when we moved to Colorado, I worked for the University of Maryland Global Campus, and that's where I got my bachelor's and my master's, because they were paying for a lot of it for working for them. So that was like a big perk. And then once I left that, if I had like some sort of gap in my resume, I remember an employer being like, oh, so you've only worked here for like a year and a half. What's up with that? And I'm like, well, I found a job and then we ended up moving, or, I was going to school or something like that. So it's like, you're constantly having to explain yourself, and it's so exhausting. So I'm like, I promise I'm a good worker. Like, I will be here on time. I will get along with everybody, but just like, give me a chance. And sometimes it's just, they just don't see that. So so we're constantly having to like volunteer places or do something to put that into our resume, so we're not like lacking that gap. That's what's so hard.
Yeah.
So,
and, degrees mean a lot. I am in grad school and
congratulations. What are you doing? What are you getting your degree in?
So my bachelor's is in health science with a minor in marketing.
Awesome.
I decided too late in my degree that I liked marketing more. So
there's
that. But then my master's is in marketing with a concentration in digital and social media.
Oh, that's so perfect.
It's so much fun and it's a lot of work, but it's like, come on, like, that journey. And having a degree means a lot, but then experience means a lot too. And I learned that a lot with my bachelor's being in health science. And I've had people say, you don't have a bachelor's in marketing. Like, why would we hire you? I'm like, I have experience in it. Like, doesn't that mean?
I know.
Like, because to me, experience means everything.
Same here.
100%. Education is important. Education is great. But then experience on top of that, like, you have to have experience to be able to go somewhere in this world.
Yeah. Isn't that? Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Well, so what were you going to do with the health science bachelor's? What was like your ultimate goal?
So for that, I wanted to be an athletic trainer.
Okay.
And a sports medicine physician. And I wanted to work for the WWE.
Oh my gosh.
That was my goal.
Love that.
That was my dream.
That's all we watched, WWE or WWF. Oh my gosh. So fun.
So that's what I wanted to do. And I was like, this is, my set. And then I was so far ahead. I had dual enrollment credits coming in from high school. And so amazing. I was about 2 years and I took full-time. I was always 5 classes. I always took summer classes full-time. So I was like quite ahead in my degree, where I could have graduated like 2 years early. And I was like, I do not want to. Like, I want to, kind of live this out. I was a 2020 graduate from high school. Yeah. So my college experience was like washed away by COVID to begin with. I
know. I always find that so sad. So sad.
Yeah, it was insane. And so like, I was like, I want to stay. Like, I don't want to rush this. And then my advisor was like, add a minor on. And I was like, okay, do I minor in marketing or journalism? And I talked to so many different people and I settled on marketing. And then that semester, I kind of like started to like marketing more and less of the health stuff. That was like my first semester of health science classes. And I was like, this is not for me. Yeah. I love anatomy and physiology, but the rest I'm like, I'm good. And then it didn't work out, but I started dating my service member and it was like, all right, well, I can't be a military spouse and be, a doctor or an athletic trainer because that's rough as it is. You have to relicense everywhere you live. And I didn't want to deal with that headache. And I loved marketing. I loved marketing more. And so I just have continued on that path and, it's paid off. So
it's so
marketing is great and it's fun and I love it. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. But my master's is in marketing and I want to also get a master's in journalism, but I started it and I put it on pause. We'll see how far it goes.
I know. I got my bachelor's in marketing and then
Okay.
my master's in business administration, but I was
Yep.
torn because I was like, I really love marketing so much. It's such a good degree and it's good to have. You can work remote during marketing,
Yeah.
whereas a lot of jobs you have to be like in person. So no,
Yeah.
I love everything about marketing. I was like, if somebody just wants to hire me to like start up their business, like I would love that.
Oh,
So
yeah. And there are so many
fun.
like entrepreneurs out there who have
Yeah.
created their own little marketing firms and stuff. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this. And doing a contracting job, doing social media. And so there's so many opportunities for that out there. It's just hard to get
I
your
know.
foot in the door
I
and get
agree.
yourself started.
Yeah, no, I agree. The other day, I feel like you had somebody who's doing bookkeeping. That's like what she was doing.
Yes.
I was like, I looked at her Instagram page and I was like, she is so good at marketing herself. Like her page looks amazing. I mean, I'm like, what a great contractor, like a position like
Yeah.
that for her to do. I was like, that's fantastic. So people like that who are spouses and they're doing stuff like this, I was like, amazing. This is
Yeah.
amazing. They're not just like following their spouse's career, like they're making a name for themselves and stepping out of the box. And it's like so exciting to see. It really is.
Yeah. And speaking of, you are an author.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah. Well, tell me about that.
Yeah. So another thing, like me putting my work out to the world, nerve-wracking because
It's so scary.
it's so scary. So Luke was deployed last year to Syria and he was gone for 9 months. And during that time, I just accepted a new position where my current job where I'm working. So I work at a law firm in Colorado Springs and I'm doing like their operations manager. So I'm running their whole show over there, but doing it remote now. But at the time I just started. So I kept thinking, okay, how am I going to balance Leo by myself with Luke gone? Luckily, we found a really good daycare for Leo. So he was fine. So during that time, it was hard for me to do things with Leo. Like I kept thinking, okay, what are we going to do to stay busy? That was like my biggest thing. What are we going to do to stay busy? Because I can't sit at home. Screen time, as much as like it's nice to have a screen, like a tablet for him, but I'm like, we can't like rely on that. So
Right.
I kept coming up with these things in my head. It would be like, go to the library, make food at home, go on different adventures, like the botanical garden up in Denver. I feel like we lived up there. The zoo, we were constantly at the zoo. I mean, all these things. So during that time, I came up with this idea of creating a book and doing the illustrations, writing this book. And it's called When You Were Away, the Daddy Edition. And at some point, I'll probably do a mommy edition, but it's about a mother and son building a bond while their spouse is deployed and just coming up with these activities, just staying busy. And it kind of starts off saying like, it looks like my son in there, but it's not of him, but it's of the son, trying to do all of these things he would do with daddy, but he didn't succeed at all because he was trying to do them on his own. And then I stepped in, or like the mom would step in saying, you know what, how about I do these things with you, but let's do it kind of a little bit our own way. So going to the library, going to story time, making our own pizza, because that's like our Friday night tradition, making our own pizza dough, everything like that. We haven't perfected like the pizza sauce yet. So we're still buying like store-bought pizza sauce, but we'll do that at some point. But just coming up with these things that brought my son and I together, I wanted to share that with people because, when spouses are deployed, I feel as though like they don't talk about like the at-home life a lot. It's always
Right.
about missing, the spouse while they're gone. And yes, obviously we miss Luke so much, but I just really wanted to focus on that mother-daughter or that mother-son bond that was built. And I just never really saw that a lot in the book. So that's kind of why I created it, is just to show other spouses like, hey, it's tough when you're gone, but we got this at home. We're going to come up with our own traditions or our own things to stay busy. So yeah, I did that. And I self-published on Amazon and it's been amazing. I feel like most of my sales right now are like family and friends, which is like fantastic. But like the outpour from the support I'm not kidding. It makes me feel so good that I did that because I was questioning it. I was like, am I worthy enough to do this? Like, are people going to think I'm weird for, doing this? And finally I was like, why do I even care? Like, who cares? Like, let's just do it and see what happens. So I'm really happy I did it. Really,
Yeah,
truly.
that's
So
incredible. And it's back to the kind of what we talked about earlier of like getting it all the negative out of the way. And
yeah,
you have to take that first step. And the thing that I've always kept reminding myself, especially with like trying to get other guests on the podcast and things
yeah,
like that, like the worst thing that's going to happen is somebody tells you no, you know?
exactly.
And
Yeah,
so like if you can not be scared of the word no,
yeah,
literally 2 letters,
yeah,
um, then you can be so successful with any little project or hobby or whatever you're trying to start. You're going to be so successful with that because
yeah.
you've already conquered that fear and kind of reversed, that anxiety of, well, what if somebody doesn't like it, you
So
know?
true. Yeah. And it's so crazy. After I released it, I had so many people reaching out to me. They were like, I really want to do this. How can I do this? Like, I've always wanted to write a children's book or this other book. Like, what made you give you the courage to do it? And I was like, same thing. It's like, putting that out into the universe. I mean, some people may read it and love the book and think it's so cute. And there's like inside the book, there's lizards that I hid. So like kids have
Yes.
to find the little lizards. And I was like, they love it, they'll love it. And if they don't, if it's not their cup of tea, that's okay too. But that was like another hard thing is the book is kind of catered to a lot of military. And I was trying to not have it so, but it's just that's our life. We know what it's like with Luke being away. Leo knows what it's like. And I have some friends where their spouse travels, but not for 9 months at a time. So, which is
Right.
crazy to say out loud. Like, I'll tell my family members, I'm like, yeah, he's going to be gone. And they're like, oh my gosh, like, how are you going to survive? I'm like, I don't know. It's like, we just survive, right? You just do
Yeah,
it.
you don't have another option in those
Mm,
situations. So it's just like you carry on and figure out how to do it all and balance it all and
yeah,
live your life like nothing's changed.
I know. Civilians must think we're like completely crazy. Just the
Oh,
lives we live.
for sure. Because let me tell you, I don't know
Yeah,
because it's literally living on survival mode
it
sometimes.
is. Yeah.
And so you don't know what's coming next. You don't know where your spouse is going. You don't know when your
Yeah.
spouse is coming home. Things change on the drop of a dime. So it's
Yeah.
just rolling with the punches and going with whatever life hands you and going with the flow.
Yeah. Nope. It's so true. With this life, I feel like you have to be very open and not be like, for me, I was always wanting to plan everything. Like I was like, okay, we're going to do this and this. And then I just realized that this plan is not going to work out and I need to accept that. And my husband he always like reassures me every single time. He's like, I know it's not going according to plan, but your plan will come into effect at one point. And I was like, I
Yeah.
know, but it's hard. It really is. So I just think finding like that good partner who like balances you is like what everybody needs. Because if you're both like a planner, it's like that's probably not going to work out as best. So with Luke, he's like more relaxed. I can be uptight at times, and he's like, oh, come down to this level. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's
So hard.
so hard. It's so
Mm.
hard for type A people living the military life where you
Oh
just
my
want to
gosh.
plan everything, know the
Yeah.
future. Life in general for type A
Yeah.
people can be really hard. Nothing's
It's
predictable,
yeah, it's so
especially
crazy.
in the military life.
Especially. No, I agree. Yeah, it's wild. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, that I think the book has been great so far. And then my mom and unfortunately, we lost my brother. So we're from Illinois, and my brother passed away last year in June. He
Mhm.
was 31, so it was
Wow.
very young, and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, when he was 25. So for 6 years, he was like struggling with this disease. And he went off to college. And I think that's when it really came out is like this disease of where he was like, we were living over in Germany when we experienced this, but like, you could just see his personality change. So After we lost him, my mom and I were like, mainly my mom, she was like, I really want to start a podcast to talk to people about resources within our community. And it doesn't have to be like Illinois, like here in Texas, I've interviewed some people too about with our podcast on not just specifically schizophrenia or bipolar, but with mental health in general. Like, what are our resources? Because when we found out with Adam, when he was diagnosed, schizophrenia is so scary. Like those words, you're like, what does this mean? And he was the type of kid who did not want to take any medication. He was very just like, I'm going to solve my own issues and it's going to be fine. But we kind of like felt like the wrath of it, like his personality, his temper, his mood. So it kind of like put a wedge in our family for such a long time. Cause I just, I'd seen my parents doing everything for him. And then he would just be kind of not the nicest kid. So it was like so hard on our family. So he ended up getting into a car accident last June because I think he was off his meds and he just wasn't himself and just drove crazy. And luckily I always think like nobody else was injured, but he ended up passing away like immediately. And from there, yeah, we've grieved so much and we've learned so much about mental health and just, I think it's just finding like the resources, the support system. And I just felt like, it was really hard for us to find that. So our mission and we don't know where this is going to go, but I'm hoping, we can talk to some people just about resources that parents, when they first find out, or friends, when they first find out that their family member or friend has like an illness, they can go seek these resources to find out what's our next step. How can we talk to them? So it's been interesting. It's so emotional because, in our first episode, we're going to release it next week. My mom is still like, we're still grieving a lot, but she ultimately is grieving so much. And I always think I can't imagine losing a son. Like I really can't. It's just, or even anybody that close to you. So I always keep telling her, I was like, are you ready for this? Are you really ready for this? She's like, yeah, this is like my purpose right now. It really is. As a mother, this is like what I need in my life. And I was like, okay, let's do it. So yeah, our first episode is very sad, but I think it's like what we needed for both of us to kind of talk about it. So,
right. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear about your brother. That's very unfortunate. But it's taking, what you're given and making the most out of it.
Yeah,
and
I think so.
Sharing, your experiences, your stories. That's, one thing I love about doing this is being able to tell people like you're not alone. Yeah. There are other people going out or going through the same things that you're going through. Maybe a little different, but the same things you're going through. You are not the only one on this earth, struggling with whatever it is.
Yeah, it's so true. I think, and mental health now, people are talking about it more, which is really great. Oh my gosh. And I have friends, they just had a baby. So I think they have like the baby blues. I don't think it's like postpartum or who knows really what it borders, but I'm like, checking in with them so much more like, hey, how are you doing? Like, just cause I know what it is as like a first time mom. I was all in my thoughts. So I was like, hopefully at one point on our podcast, we'll have somebody with postpartum or something like that. And they can kind of talk more about what that is like and getting those resources to help new moms specifically. So, but yeah, it's, oh my gosh, once you dive into like the emotions, you're like, it's just seeing everybody who struggled with this and you didn't know that's what's really hard. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Life is crazy.
Yes, that is how it goes. But where can listeners, listen to your podcast and find your book at?
Yep. So everything right now I have it just on Instagram. So on my book, you can probably follow my personal page, which is ZEE Wig, WIG. That's on Instagram. And then our podcast is at Mother's Purpose. And we're on Spotify right now. So yeah, we're going to release our first episode next week. We just released the trailer. So yeah, it's going to be fun. My mom is like such a giggler. So you'll hear her giggling. I'm like, Mom, like in the video, I'm like, it's like so funny.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I love that. And the last thing I want to ask you is, what advice would you give to another military spouse?
Ooh, I think we've talked about this, but being open to change, and then just, I always say, give yourself grace, like 100%, like no matter what you're going through in life, like this is temporary, like 100%. I know that now. And you just have to give yourself grace with whatever you're going through, because if this is like a really hard time in your life, you know, you're going to get through it. Like you see that the end light at the end of the tunnel, you know, it's going to get better, but just getting to the end of it, just be open to new opportunities and just kind of be open to meeting new people. That's like the biggest thing I've learned being in the military, as a spouse, just meeting new people. You know, there's like so many people, unexpected friends that I have met, and they're like my lifelong friends now. And even one of them lives in Italy, and I'll chat with her maybe once a month. But when I connect with her, it's so meaningful. It really is, because I'm like, hey, I have missed you. This is what I want to tell you. And we'll spend like an hour just talking about life. And you know, she's not keeping score, like, oh, I can't believe you even called me every day. It's just finding those meaningful friends, is what everybody needs. So yeah, I think just giving yourself grace, be open to opportunities, and no matter, life is going to work out. It really does. And you just got to be open to it. So that's what I would say.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And thank you again so much, Lynzee, for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed getting to chat with you.
Fun. So fun meeting you. Honestly, I'm like so happy with what you're doing. Honestly, I think you're giving spouses a voice, and even children, like military children, a voice. And I love that so much. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a like, follow, and comment. Also, be sure to check out Instagram and Facebook at Grace of a Military Child and Life for more awesome content. For information on the podcast, Military Child Bigs and Littles, GoAMCL blog, or other resources, visit www.goamcl.org. You can also email me at Gracie, that's Gracie @goamcl.org, with any questions or comments. To be a guest on the podcast, you can schedule it at www.goamcl.org/schedule a podcast, all one word, or contact me via social media or email. Stay tuned for the next episode where another incredible story is shared.